Hello, all. Welcome to a lesson on the concluding paragraph in your literary analysis essay. So, our first piece of information to understand and or remember is that after drafting the introduction and body paragraphs, it's time to consider how to end your essay. We have to situate it within the essay. The conclusion paragraph functions in much the same way as the introduction paragraph. So in the intro, the writer introduces the broad topic and narrowed the thesis statement, right? Getting from broad to quite specific. In essence, the writer tells the reader what the essay is about. In the introduction paragraph mini lesson, we looked at the attention grabber, the transition, and the thesis. Okay, so to review, the attention grabber pulls us into the essay. It's followed by a transition and then focus in the thesis. It should begin broad and then become more narrowed, as represented by this shape. In conclusion, the conclusion paragraph acts in a similar manner as the introduction. So it retells the reader what they just learned and emphasizes the main topics and narrowed thesis of the essay. However, they are in an opposite direction, going from narrow to broad. Okay. I want you to also understand and note that the rephrased thesis is not a repeated thesis. You are saying or presenting your main argument again, but you are not just repeating your thesis. Okay. Your conclusion, also has a summary of the main point and then a broad or universal statement. So when put together, the introduction and conclusion paragraphs create an hourglass shape with the body paragraphs as the narrow neck of the hourglass because they represent the most specific and focused part of the essay. This can be illustrated as follows. So we have our big intro here, our narrow body paragraphs very focused on our thesis, and then the widening scope of our conclusion down here. So the parts of a conclusion paragraph. The rephrased thesis statement. So the first step in writing a conclusion paragraph is to rephrase your thesis. In this part of the conclusion paragraph, you should remind your reader what the essay was about. To do this, refer back to your thesis statement in the introduction paragraph and put it into new words. Do not simply cut and paste the exact same sentence into the conclusion paragraph. Say it again in a new way. This will refocus your reader's attention on your argument. Then you provide a summary of the main points. So the step is self-explanatory, but be sure to keep it brief. There is no need to go into any detail of what you already discussed in the body. The best way to do this is to summarize the topic sentences of your body paragraphs. Be careful that you do not introduce any new evidence or quotations or new ideas into the conclusion. That's super important. Don't introduce any new arguments or ideas into your conclusion. If you find that you've brought up a new point and that you want to keep it, put it in the body of your essay so that it doesn't appear out of the blue in the conclusion. So just like you want to avoid, having your quotations be out of the blue or appear out of the blue in your body paragraphs, don't have anything out of the blue in the conclusion. This section of the conclusion paragraph should be 1 to 2 sentences. And then you have your broad or universal statement. So just like the introduction paragraph begins with a broad topic, the conclusion paragraph should end with a broad statement to give your essay a universal appeal. The final sentence should answer the "so what" question. So the reader just read your essay. So what? Why should he or she care? I think we've talked about this in class already a little bit. This final part of the conclusion paragraph should address something broad and universal about society or mankind or the world, the future, literature in general, the theme, etc. It should not say anything specific about the specific piece of literature that was discussed, but should instead appeal to a broad universal level that could apply to anyone reading your essay. Since this is the last part of the essay that your reader will see, it should be powerfully worded and memorable. It should leave the reader with a strong impression of your argument. To do this, try using a rhetorical device such as parallel structure to give your concluding sentence some punch. Rhetorical structure, parallel structure is talked about a little bit in your introduction paragraph lesson. So that's using things like anaphora and using the same structure in a sentence repeatedly. It adds some lyricism, but it also adds memorability. The conclusion paragraph is an important paragraph in the essay because it is the writer's last attempt to convince the reader of the argument. It's like the closing statement of a lawyer. A carefully crafted conclusion paragraph reiterates the thesis statement by emphasizing the most important content of the entire essay. It is important not to rush through writing the conclusion paragraph. Pay close attention to how you construct and word the final words of the essay because they will most likely be what the reader remembers most about the essay. So here's a sample conclusion paragraph. The ratiocination key is here, so the rephrased thesis statement is underlined, the summary of the main points is italicized, and the broad universal statement is bolded. And I will read out example number 1. You can read further examples on your own. So the lives of both men and women of the Beat generation showed a difference in freedom and rebellion that prevented the women from striking out on the literal road. Instead, women's lives served as their road, guiding them towards a redefinition of gender roles. Joyce Johnson's memoir, Minor Characters, explores the difficulty she faced in navigating her role as mother, girlfriend, and artist. Diane DePrima's memoir, Recollections of My Life as a Woman, similarly depicts a female writer's struggle to find her artistic identity in a male-dominated society. While many female beat writers did not assert the complete freedom of mobility seen with the male writers, the lives and artistic works of these women served as a stepping stone for future generations of women to emulate. So, reflection question, what makes this conclusion paragraph so effective? Well, it starts off by doing just what it should do. It rephrases the thesis statement. So even if, you haven't read the essay at all that this comes from, but you know that the thesis has to do with the men and women of the Beat generation and how the lives of these men and women were different. And because women could not strike out on a literal road, they didn't have the physical freedom of men. But their lives served as the road, guiding them toward a redefinition of gender roles. Okay, it's clear that that's what was just being talked about in the essay. We've got a summary here, 2 sentences, right? Just one sentence about the first text being discussed, one sentence about the second text that was discussed. No new information is presented here. It's just a summary of the arguments. And then here is that universal statement or that broad idea. And this is about the type of literature. So this shows that, the women who wrote this type of literature, this beat literature, beat writers, provided or broke the path, made the path, set the path for generations of women to come. Okay, so it follows the structure that is being provided and that is effective. And, it makes, hopefully you want to read more writers of this time and of this style, and shows that when you do read them, you'll see, these ideas presented. So I've got 2 more paragraphs here that you can read and go through on your own. I want you to note that concluding paragraphs, don't need to be super long. 5 sentences, 6 sentences. They don't need to be really, really long because you're not introducing any new arguments. You are just wrapping up the arguments you've already presented. So drafting your conclusion, you can use this sheet to help you out if you want when you're drafting your conclusion paragraph. So again, you start with a rephrased thesis, your summary of your main points, 1 to 2 sentences, usually 2, and then your broad universal statement. So again, I'm not going to ask that you hand it in to me for review. I trust that if you are needing support, you are going to ask for it. If you want me to take a look at your conclusion, I am very happy to do so, and I will do it as quickly and efficiently as possible. So if you'd like support, just give me a shout. Now, the universal statement, this is, I think, something that students struggle with. So here are some directions and an activity. So the last sentence of an essay is oftentimes the most difficult sentence to write. This sentence needs to be broad, universal, and step away from the literature that is analyzed in the body of the essay. This universal statement will make the essay have relevance to life beyond the details of the story itself, which is why artists create art in the first place. Review the following conclusion paragraphs from student essays and match the appropriate conclusion paragraph to its corresponding universal statement. After you match each final sentence to its paragraph, answer the reflection questions that follow. So you've got 3 concluding paragraphs, and then you've got 3 options for universal statements. Match those together. And once you've done that, think about how these concluding statements are universal, so how they can apply to a broad topic. I want you to think about what makes those concluding statements memorable and impactful, and what rhetorical strategies can you identify in these concluding statements. So whether it's, contrasts or parallel structure or, anything like that kind of was talked about in your hook, those are rhetorical devices or strategies that you can think about for your conclusion as well. Now, adding rhetorical power to the concluding statement. I want you to rewrite the universal statement, the concluding statement, of your conclusion paragraph 3 different ways. So your conclusion paragraph, trying out the different rhetorical strategies below. After you have written your concluding statement 3 different ways, put a star beside the one you want to use, and use it in your essay. And if you want my feedback, share what you're going to use with me, and we can discuss it. So strategy number 1 is parallel structure. It's repeating a grammatical pattern at least 2 times, which I've talked about before. There is strategy 2, which is the antithesis or the contrast that I mentioned above. So it's a form of parallel structure that uses an opposite or contrast to emphasize conflicting ideas. And there's a third strategy, which is short sentences. So it's a series of 2 or more short sentences can make a strong impact at the end of an essay. And that's it. That's kind of the main things I need you to understand about a concluding paragraph. They are deceptively simple, and I think sometimes people forget about how important they are. They focus mainly on the body paragraphs. But conclusions are just as important as any other part of the essay. No one part is less important than the other. They all matter in terms of how strong and effective your argument is. So there you go. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you for your time in watching this video.